Exercise 1. In this exercise, we're going to take a look at some of the basic functionality and an introduction to the interface using SolidWorks 2016. The model that you see up on the screen is our goal, and we'll also take a look at some labs that go along with it. Now, you can actually download a manual that goes along with this exercise at www.vertanu1.com. And let me just bring that up. And here you can see the web page. So up at the top there, VERTAN as in Nancy, UX1.com. At this website, you could just go in and grab whatever you want. You go to instructional manuals, find the SolidWorks basics, and it should bring up the manual. And then from here, you could scroll down and look at anything that you're interested in. There are links to videos as well as anything else that you might want to know. Basically, just lessons and things such. Okay, but exercise 1 starts on page 21, and there you can see a primitive of our goal. And so you're welcome to grab those. Anything else on this web page, Vertanu 1, you could take a look at. There's videos that link back to the videos, essentially. Part files, which you might need for some of the other exercises if you continue on with the course, and other things as well. Feel free to poke around in there. It's all free. So let's begin. When you start up SolidWorks, just make sure you go up here. I like to have this tacked on. This little arrow, if you move your pointer over it, you'll see pull-down menus appear. I like to turn that on because I like to show both pull-down menus as well as the icons. And I'll show you some fast keys as well. Now from here, you could either click on the little white sheet of paper or look at this. You could just go to File, New. A little bit easier to describe other than trying to describe an icon every time. Thus is why I use it. When you go to File, New, you'll see that there's parts, assemblies, and drawings. Under Advanced, you'll see that there's a variety of templates. You could also create templates, which you'll learn in future versions of future lessons of the software. But in this case, just make sure the first 4 lessons are entirely utilizing just part files. The 5th lesson goes into assemblies, and the 6th lesson goes into drawings. So let's start with part and just hit OK. You can see when it opens up, you have a series of icons at the top, and this is called the ribbon with these tabs that you see here. You might not have the render tools or simulation or analysis on there. Those are options. This comes with the educational license, but not all companies have that. So as what you can see here, if you wanted to check to see if you have any of those, you could go to SolidWorks add-ins and you could activate them. The PhotoView 360 is the photo renderer. And again, that's an additional option you may not have, as well as SolidWorks Simulation, which we're not really going to use in this exercise. But make sure you're on the Features tab. The only 2 tabs we're really going to utilize today are the Features and the Sketch tab. I will go through a bit of photorealistic rendering for those of you who have it, and you could see how to create a portfolio using that and in another exercise. So let's begin. On the left-hand side, this is called the Feature Manager Design Tree. And what we're going to do is it actually has a list that keeps track historically of everything that you do. So if you create a sketch and you create an extrusion from that, you'll see those listed here. So it's your roadmap for the entire part that you're building. But it starts off with these planes, front, top, and right. As well as material, you could specify material by right-clicking and pre-select that or select it later, which we'll probably do. But right now, the planes are your paper. And it really depends on you and the part that you're working on, which plane is best suited. But you could pretty much build on any plane you like. It's just that some planes might be better suited for other views. So for example, if you were making a stapler's front view or side view, like for example, the right side view, you would see the length of the stapler. You might want to sketch on the right plane to draw the most profile details, versus if you were to select the front of the stapler, it's really just a rectangle. So there's a little bit of logic behind that. That's covered in future exercises. They call it design intent and things like that. But right now we're just going to go ahead, and most of these I just drawn the front plane for the most part. You select the plane that you wish to draw on, and try not to move your pointer too quickly because there's a really nice option that pops up. If you'll notice, I didn't move my pointer as soon as I clicked on the plane. And by the way, by clicking on, I'm left clicking. The right mouse button, if you right click, it gives you a series of pull down menus. It gives you options. This gives you some quick launch tools, as you can see there. And the very first one is a nice one. It's the sketch tool. You also have show, and you have zoom to selection, and normal too. But by selecting this quick launch, it makes your life a little bit easier. It saves you maybe a second on time. Otherwise, to start a sketch on that plane, you have to click up here on the sketch tab and click on the sketch button. Now be aware, if you hit the little arrow underneath the sketch button, you'll see there's sketch and 3D sketch, and the 3D sketch on plane. 3D sketch and 3D sketch on plane are covered in future exercises. It's more a little bit of an advanced topic that I try and cover later on. Right now we're not going to use that because with the 2D sketches we will be able to generate the 3D geometry pretty easily. So I'm going to click on sketch here, but either one of those options is fine. Sketch up there, or if you click on the plane and you get the quick launch. Okay, now you'll notice that the plane rotates until it's parallel to the screen. So one way you know you're in a sketch is down below here. It'll say you're editing the sketch, and you'll also see a red origin that will appear. The origin is your zero marker in space. It doesn't move. It essentially is there and it stays there. Unlike other CAD systems, you don't want to try, don't even bother trying moving it. There are options for changing the origin when you export it as a different file type, but again, that's an advanced topic not covered in this lesson. Let's go up here, and you'll see that there's lines, circles, arcs, all types of tools to choose from. If you hit the little arrow to the right of line, for example, you'll see there's center line, midpoint line, and line. So those little arrows give you different options. But we're really more interested in the corner rectangle. But hit the little arrow to the right of the corner rectangle, and you'll see there's a bunch of options there too. There's center rectangle, which is a wonderful tool. That's great for the lab that goes along with this, lab 1B, because it creates everything off the center, and you can make, it's great for symmetric parts. But in this case, let's just go with corner rectangle, as this isn't really a 100% symmetrical part. So click on corner rectangle. You'll see you get the same options on the left to change it. So again, SolidWorks is very forgiving, allows you to do what you want to do and change things if you need to. Move your pointer on the screen, you'll see a little cursor, and it has the rectangle to the right of it. That's just to let you know that that's what you're using. Move your pointer, that little cursor, over the origin. When you get the orange dot, go ahead and click, and again, your left mouse button. Move your pointer up closer to the top of the screen, and you'll see that you get X and Y feedback. And by the way, I'm in inches, ANSI inch, so those of you who are overseas, you feel free to switch it from inches, from metric to inches. In this case, you'll see that gives you some feedback. That's just to get you pretty close to the marker. You don't have to exact on this X and Y. In fact, I'm not even worried about it. I'm just going to click up here, and I see a rectangle. Now, when you select that, you'll see that not only does a rectangle appear, but all these little boxes, these green boxes. And those are another form of constraints. There's two forms of constraints inside SolidWorks. In the manual, you could read up on this if you like. But there's dimensional constraints, which we haven't put any in right now. And then there's an additional layer of constraints called relationships. And these relationships are common elements of geometry, such as parallelism, concentricity, perpendicularity, horizontal, vertical, symmetric. So all these different options enable you to draw very exacting. The days of using older CAD systems that didn't have this are pretty much gone or going away. This eliminates what I would call the challenges that one would have to actually draw extra lines and trim them up. SolidWorks has eliminated a lot of that. That's from the very start when they introduced the software. But needless to say, these are very useful if you want to see them. If you hit the escape key on your keyboard, it will disable the line tool that you're, or the rectangle tool. So I just hit escape in the upper left corner of the keyboard to do that. Now to fit this to the screen, a fast key for that is just the F key wedged between the D and the G keys, the F key. That's zoom to fit, and that will zoom it up on your screen. Now, you'll see that some of the geometry varies in color. There's the lines that are black, and notice that those are locked into the origin. Your origin is a great marker because it doesn't ever move, like I said, so you could lock your geometry into it. The blue lines, if you grab those with your pointer now, make sure you hit escape first to do this. You could grab it with your mouse button, your left mouse button, and just drag it. You'll see that the sketches are very flexible. Okay. Now, that's because it's not fully defined, and in this case, it's what they call underdefined. You could see at the bottom it says underdefined. Blue geometry, like these lines that appear, are underdefined. It means that you're either missing relations or dimensions to fully constrain it. So essentially, you want to get everything to a state where it's black, which means it's fully defined. That's when you want to go to production. So before you go to production, actually, make sure everything is fully defined. Because if it's blue, it means you're missing something usually. SolidWorks doesn't force you to fully constrain it, but it's a good idea. It's a good practice. Okay, now let's fully constrain this. What we're missing are smart dimensions. So go ahead and click on the smart dimensions button up here, right above sketch. You'll see if you hit the little arrow underneath it, there's a lot of other options. You could do ordinate dimensions, horizontal, vertical ordinate, things like that. Whatever method you prefer. I'm going to go ahead and just use smart dimensions. Now what you do is you just select a line, for example. Even though this line is black, it still doesn't have a height assigned to it. Thus is why the point at the top is blue. So let's go ahead and select. You don't have to select the endpoints. You could actually select the entire line just by clicking somewhere near the middle of it. And click. And in this case, I must have had another edge selected. But I'm going to go ahead and hit the escape key a couple times just to make sure that I'm not clicking on the wrong thing. So now, there we go. From the last line that I had drawn, or when I actually dragged it, a point was still selected in the upper corner. That locked me into only a width dimension, which I didn't want. So I had to hit the escape key a couple times. Okay, so now that I've got that, I went back to smart dimension, and I'm just going to click right there. I clicked on the middle of that line. I'm just going to drag this over to the left. Now, again, a good practice is just imagine like you're going to detail this, because later on when we learn about drawings in the 6th exercise, if you lay this out in a clean fashion, that's how it's going to turn out when you actually want to go into drawings. It's going to actually, most of these dimensions will appear as they did here, how you laid them out. So try and center your dimensions or lay them out like you would see them on a print. It's just a good practice. Now this needs to be 5, so I just clicked once and it brings up the modify box. Now in here you could type in an explicit value. You could move this little bar to adjust it. You'll see it actually adjusts the height. But I'm going to type in an explicit value of 5. Now feel free to use the 5 number on your keypad. Just remember you have your to make sure your number lock button in the upper left of the keypad is turned on before you type in a number. I'm going to type in 5 and hit enter on the keyboard. Either enter or return will work. Okay, in this case you can see it lengthened it, and it's actually out of the screen. So if you recall, the button for zoom to fit was the F key. F is in fit. Go ahead and hit that. All right, now let's go ahead and dimension the bottom line. Again, in the middle, if you like. A lot of people are used to dimensioning with other CAD systems at the endpoints. That's fine. It's just an extra click. I like to just be as efficient as possible. I just click right in the middle of the line. But there are times when clicking on the endpoints is important. Right now it's not. So just click down below there in an open spot. And let's go ahead and type in 3. You don't have to type in 3.000 or anything like that. Only if it's a whole number, just 3. You don't have to type in what's after the decimal place unless there is actually something like 3.125 or something. But in this case, just type in 3, hit enter, and it knows to go to 3 inches. Speaking of the decimal places, that brings us to a good question, like what if we wanted to see a higher precision? That is located in the heart of SolidWorks, as I call it, which is the File Properties. Go ahead and select File Properties. Oh, I'm sorry, not File Properties. The little gear options. My mistake there. Click on Options. Okay, now it's broken up into two tabs. There's the system options and the document properties. If you don't have a part file or any file up, it automatically just gives you system options. You won't see the document properties. That's because it's only affecting, the document properties are only affecting the currently active document that you have selected up on the screen. The system options are global settings. Whatever you set up in here is going to be carried on throughout any file that you bring up, no matter what. So on the system options, things like the background color you could change, and all types of things. You could go through that. I'm not going to go through it in detail right now, but we just want to affect this particular document. Notice if you go to the document properties, this is where you could change it from ANSI to ISO, Ghost, BSI, JS, any standard that's pretty much on the planet. Now on the left, you could go to units. And here is probably the most important of all the options, is the units. How do you change them back and forth? Well, right here you'll see I'm set up for inch, pound, second. And you could do this at any time, by the way. You could have modeled an entire part in the metric system or in inches and convert it instantly. And it's not, it automatically it transforms it to the proper dimensions. It's not like older systems where you'd have to rescale it to whatever. You just kind of change it and it's done. So over here you'll see the length and we see decimals. This is actually the decimal places that we want to see. So if you click over here and you could change it to 3 decimal places, so 0.123. You'll see it's going to modify the ANSI standard, but that's fine. And you'll see there's other options in here, which I'm not going to go through right now. Just go ahead and hit OK. Now you can see that the dimensions have updated. They are 3 decimal places, so you could get much higher precision if you wish. All right, now at this point, we're ready to go ahead and extrude this. So you're ready to make your first 3-dimensional model. Go to the Features tab up in the upper left, and you'll see Extruded Boss Base. Notice that these other icons are grayed out. Whenever you see icons grayed out, it means that you're missing something. You're not ready to do those features. It's called the Object Action Paradigm, and SolidWorks employs it here, and it eliminates the obvious. So things, and it's great for new users because it's not going to give you options that you can't use. So that's why it grays them out. And then it makes it a little easier for people to understand. Now look at, we could go to Extrude Boss Base, select that, and it should move you into an isometric view, and then you could see like a jello part. It's transparent, and if you grab this little arrow, you'll see a little ruler comes out, and you could this is great for conceptualization. It's not always the easiest to snap it to exactly 1 inch. Thus is why on the left you have the ability to enter explicit information. So for example, this needs to be a 1/2 inch, so you can type in 0.5. And if you hit enter one time, it will automatically update, and yet it leaves the Boss Extrude tools open, because notice there's other options in here. But we just want the basics, blind, 0.5. Make sure it's moving forward, and hit the green check mark up here. And now we have our first solid. Now, to rotate a solid, I'll show you the fast key first. Look at the keys on your keyboard, the little arrow keys, up, down, left, and right. Go ahead and hit them. It rotates in 15-degree increments. Now if you hold Control and the arrow keys, that pans left, right, up, and down. That's Control with the arrow keys. If you hold Alt with the arrow keys, it rotates clockwise and counterclockwise. Only the left and right arrow keys function for that. And if you hold Shift and the arrow keys, it rotates in 90-degree increments. So there's just a few extra fast keys for you to learn. Now here's the great fast key, the space bar. Hit your space bar right there in the center between the Alt keys. And with that, you'll see a cube will come up. If you don't see the cube, this orientation dialog box appears. Make sure that your view selector appears. I just call it the cube because it looks like an ice cube. With that on, it's very nice because you could go ahead and select different view states. Like if I click on this corner, it'll go to an isometric view. Hit the space bar again, you could select, I want to see the left-hand view. That's this little plate on the left. Click on that. It'll orient you to the left side. hit the space bar again. If you want, you could use the right front. Notice there's Control 1, Control 4 gives you these options, so you could use any of those. Also right here you have isometric. If you hit the little arrow, you have isometric, dimetric, trimetric. And there's some other options in here. You could go to the previous views. You could add new views. That means you could zoom up on a certain area, create a new view of just that zoomed up region. It's really pretty cool. And update standard view. So if you don't like your front view, you could rotate it and make the back, select the back view and make the back view your new front view. So it's really some nice tools. Thus you don't have to reorient the actual origin. Okay, so and then there's different top view horizontal, so you could break that up. Or look at this, you have 4 view, hit your space bar again, view orientation. If you want, you could actually tack this in as well, and that way it won't disappear if you like it on. But really, it's nice just to clear the screen out. I'm just going to go with the single view there. Okay, and it's set to front. Now let me show you how to rotate dynamically. On your mouse button, if you have a scroll on it, move your pointer on the screen and scroll forward and backwards, and you'll see it zooms in and out. Now notice you can take your pointer, get to that upper left hand corner, and let's say you want to focus and just zoom up to that upper left hand corner. Keep the pointer on it and scroll towards it, and it will focus in on it. Scroll back out or hit your F key, zoom to fit. Alright, now to rotate dynamically. Move your pointer in the center of the screen and depress that scroll button. Actually push it down, don't scroll it. Push it and hold it. Move your mouse left, right, up and down. And that's how you rotate dynamically. Then release it. Now up here you have a lot of these same tools. You have zoom to fit. Look at that, it's the F key, so you could click on that. You have zoom to area. You could click on this and drag a fence around whatever region you want to zoom up to. And you have previous view as well. There's also section views. If you click on section views, you can drag through. You could rotate by grabbing these little areas here. Now let's say you hit the green check mark or enter, and then it's like, oh darn, it's in section. Just click on section view again to disable it. And then over here you have display style. Display style, you could remove the edges, just show shaded without the hard edges. I prefer shaded with edges, it's easier to see. Hidden lines removed. You have also integrated preview, that's for PhotoView 360 only. If you don't have it on, it's not going to work. Wireframe, if you like to work with that. Again, I prefer shade with edges. Now over here you have the view orientation. That's the same thing when we hit the space bar. Okay. Also you have hide show items, change visibility between things. I'm not going to cover that right now. You have edit appearance and apply scene. Now apply scene is really nice. Look at this. You have some very basic scenes here, or you could go ahead and get into deeper ones. So like plain white, very easy to see, brightens it up. If you don't like that one, you could go with something else. Rooftop, it's a little bit darker. But I'm going to stick with plain white because it's just easier to see on the big screen for me. And then finally over here on the far right, you have the view settings like perspective. That gives you a vanishing point so it looks more realistic. It's not the easiest thing to work in perspective, so I suggest shutting it off. It's great though for conceptualization and when you're making photorealistic renderings. So just remember where that is because it's very useful. There's also a cartoon interface. And I'm not going to go with it right now, but I'll turn that off. And then also you have ambient occlusion, turns off some additional shadows, and shadows in shaded mode. You might not want that. See, it turns the shadows off. If you're working off of a tablet that's not all that powerful for the graphics card, you could turn off those things and speed it up a little bit by disabling shadows and things like that. Okay, so let's hit our spacebar again and let's go to the front view orientation. You could click either here on the front face, or you could click on this front, or Control 1. Now what we're going to do is we're going to sketch on that front face. So go ahead and click on the face one time. release it. When I say click, I'm referring to the left mouse button. Very rare from now on you'll hear me say left mouse button. When I say click, I refer to left automatically. I will always make sure I say, when you want to right click, I will say right click, and also I will say middle click if you want to rotate or do something else. Okay, so when you click on this, you'll see you get the quick launch tools, just like we saw earlier when we selected the front plane, but a little bit more detailed now this time around. Now there are two sketch tools, and so you need to be very careful what you select here. You have the ability to edit the existing sketch. That's the old sketch. You don't want that one right now, but be aware if you ever wanted to change that, that's the 5x3 box, you could edit that and make changes to it, add to it, do whatever you want. You could also edit the feature. That's the extrusion depth of 0.5. Let's say you wanted to be 1 inch. You could click on that and edit it, and it goes back. And this is the beauty of parametrics and history inside SolidWorks. You could change and edit anything. It's very forgiving. But this is actually the one we're interested in, sketch. So go ahead and click on sketch. And that starts a new sketch on the surface that we just clicked on. Be aware you could click on any planar surface or plane. If it's radial or non-planar, you will not be able to sketch with the traditional sketch tools on it. Okay, so now what we're going to do, we're going to make a boss over the top. So click on corner rectangle and glide up to the origin, click, and again, remember you want that to turn orange. I went a little quick through there, so I apologize. And now move your pointer to this edge on the far right. You'll see the whole edge highlights in like an orange dashed preview. You'll also notice to the right of your pointer there's a rectangle as well as a little yellow box. Very similar to the green boxes we saw, which were actually the relations or the constraints that it automatically sets up for you. Try moving this, but don't click. Just try moving it to the midpoint, and you'll see it actually shows you a midpoint. Remember that, because for the lab 1 that goes along with this exercise, when you do it on your own, you'll want to look for midpoints. They're very useful, but we don't want that right now. I actually just wanted to show that to you. Instead, move down a little bit, and it's going to be, X is going to be 3 inches. It's going to be tied to that edge. But the Y needs to be about 1.5. So just get pretty close. I'm at like 1.789. That's fine. Just click. Again, you'll see all the little relations and such. You could just be aware if you hit escape and you wanted to remove those, which I don't want you to do right now, you could click on them and hit delete if you accidentally establish a relation that you didn't want. But in this case, we're looking to go to Smart Dimension. Go ahead and select Smart Dimension, and I'll move your pointer to this line over here or the one on the left. Either one is fine. Click on it, drag it to the right, and center the dimension, again, just to make it look nice. Click to drop it, and type in 1.5. Hit enter. Hit escape on your keyboard. Maybe hit it a couple times just to make sure you're not in anything. And if we rotate around, remember the mouse button you rotate around with is the center mouse button, which is typically a wheel these days. And you're not actually scrolling that center mouse button. If you want, that zooms in and out. You're just holding it down and moving left and right, up and down to rotate. I would recommend, if you want, pause this video and play with it for 15 minutes. Rotate, hit your space bar, go to the different views. One of the biggest things is orienting your part to get to where you want to learn how to get it. Just like when a child is born, they hold things in their hand and they rotate it and they look at it at all different perspectives. You want to learn that. That's a very important and critical tool to understand inside SolidWorks in order to be successful with it. So spend some time, rotate it around, have a little fun with it. If you've never used a CAD system, do it. If you've used other CAD systems, they all pretty much do it the same way nowadays. So it's really up to you. Okay, so anyhow, now we're going to go ahead and we're going to extrude this. So if you remember, the Features tab is for the extrusions, or I like to call like the 3D tools. Brings us into the 3D world. Notice the object action paradigm and action here. It's actually activated a few more tools for us because now we have the ingredients needed to maybe use those, which we're not really going to use them just yet, but just be aware we're looking just for extrude boss base again. Click on that. It should recall the last dimension we plugged in, which is 0.5. And we could see it here, it's previewing, and that's exactly what we want. So you don't have to change anything here. One thing to note, there is a merge results tool. Those of you who might have used previous CAD systems where you do Boolean operations, where you merge them This is basically unite. This gives you the option to not unite it if you want to keep them separate, but we do want to keep these. In fact, all the models we're going to do in this advanced class are pretty much we're going to keep merge results on as a default. So just be aware of that. Do not turn that one off. Hit the green check mark and then hit escape after you're done. And you'll see now that it's added on that block. And it's one continuous part. If we were to have selected, like, look at this, we could go back to that Boss Extrude 2. See our feature tree? It's starting to add additional features. The first one was that base block down there, the 5x3. The second one is one we just created. By selecting it, it highlights them. So if you want to edit them, you could click on it. Look at this. You could go to Edit Feature, and it brings us back to the extrude. So if we wanted to change that, you can actually toggle this up or down, do whatever you want, play with it. In this case, 0.5. If we turn off merge results, they would be two separate parts. We don't want that. Just hit the green check mark. So now you could see, you could edit virtually any feature or any sketch that you create inside SolidWorks. All right, now we need to make a hole. Now there is a hole wizard, which is phenomenal. If I click on that, you'll see there's all types of, all the standard holes, countersinks, national pipe threads. It's really a phenomenal tool. We're not going to do that just yet. Oops, let me cancel out of there. I want to show you just how to cut a hole with the sketch tool. So go ahead and select this face. Notice I'm in an isometric mode still. If you want to go normal too, you can. But get used to isometric because it really isn't that hard to work in, as long as you don't have perspective on. So you select that face and start a sketch. Now remember, you could always go to Sketch and click on the Sketch tool up here as well, if you missed that. Now go to the Circle tool. If you hit the little arrow to the Circle tool, you'll see there's just circle or perimeter circle. We just want the basic circle, which is just circle. Move your pointer over this surface, and we want it kind of in the upper left-hand quadrant. You're just going to click one time, release it, drag out a circle, and the radius it gives you maybe less than a ½ inch or so. Like mine's 0.411. Whatever, it's fine. Just click, and now hit escape on your keyboard to get out of the circle tool. Now go to the Smart Dimension tool, and you'll see since mine was still selected, I don't have to click on it. I could automatically just start dragging out a diameter dimension here. Notice it gives you a diameter dimension versus a radius. The only time it gives you a radius by default is if it's an arc. In other words, if it's an open circle. So if there's any openings in it, automatically gives you a radius. If it's a full circle, completely watertight, it will always give you a diameter. So go ahead and just click up here to drop it. Okay, and if you didn't get that, remember you just select the circle and then drag the dimension out, click to drop it. This needs to be 0.75, so 3/4 of an inch. Now let's say you wanted to show that as a radius. Usually you want to show it more as a diameter, but if you wanted to, SolidWorks, again, very forgiving. You could go to leaders, and right here you could tell it, give me a radius, and you'll see it will change your radius. We actually want a diameter though there, so make sure diameter is selected. Hit the green check. Now, if you hit escape a couple times, just make sure you're not in anything. The next thing we want to do is we want to add locating dimensions for this, because where exactly is it? Right now, if we just drag this, you'll see we could drag it anywhere. We need to specify, just like if you're going to drill this, you would lay it out on a part and drill it. But use the Smart Dimension, and you can either click on that center point, which if you want, you could click on it, and then select like the left edge. Let's say we're going to dimension off that left edge. Drag it up here and center that dimension. Get it in there, click, and that needs to be 1 for 1 inch. Now you can either select the center point or the arc or the circle, whatever you want to do. It always goes to the center point by default. I'm going to go ahead and click on the circle this time and then dimension it to the top edge, again for a location dimension, and drag this to the left and center it so it looks decent. Click 1, type in 1 and hit enter. You'll see it's turned black now. Before it was blue, that was underdefined. Now it's black. And again, it's because you generally, if you're going into production, you wanted to locate it there. So make sure you add those dimensions to fully define it. Be aware you can accidentally add too many dimensions and get this. Now, I don't want you to do this, but in the event you do, you click on this. Let's say you weren't thinking, or there's hundreds of dimensions up on the screen. You didn't realize you already had this one dimension. Let's say a dimension to this end. You're going to get a yellow color that will appear, and it'll say, do you want to make this dimension driven? In this case, if you didn't want that 1-inch dimension, go ahead and leave this dimension driving, meaning it's in control, it's in the driver's seat, versus if it's being driven around, it's under control by someone else. It turns out to be a reference dimension. And the color changes to gray for that reference dimension. So you can identify reference dimensions from the traditional driving dimensions by their color, black and gray. Okay, but in this case, I don't want it at all. But if you did, let's say you made this dimension driven, you hit OK. Now I hit escape. You can see it's like a light, or it's a dark gray, but we really don't need it. If I tried to click on it to change its value, I couldn't do it. It'll tell you dimension is driven. Its value cannot be changed. Versus if I double click on this 1-inch dimension, and let's say change it, look at that. The gray dimension, which is just a reference dimension, automatically updates with the driving dimension. So I don't really need that 2-inch dimension. I'm going to click on it. And this is how you delete things. You could delete lines. Usually if you delete lines, select them from the center of the line, not from the endpoints. It doesn't delete endpoints. You have to delete the whole line. So in this case, we just select the dimension, the actual numbers, and hit delete on your keyboard. That's right above the arrow keys. DEL, delete. And it should disappear. All right. So now that we have our profile, now we could go to features. And you want to remove material, so you select extruded cut this time. It's a new tool for us. So to add material, it's extruded boss base. To remove material, it's extruded cut, 2 separate tools. I know other CAD systems sometimes integrate them into one. SolidWorks has it this way. Go to extruded cut, and instead of blind, let's see what we have in there. Design intent is the way you're planning on having this model work in the event that changes roll down. Changes always occur throughout design. And in this case, if someone ever thickened this plate, it was normally a 1/2 inch, let's say they made it 1 inch, if we were to leave it at blind and 0.5, that would mean we would have to update the hole to match the depth, and it's a whole nother step again. So it's a waste of time. So if you know that it's always going to be a through hole, instead of blind, select through all. And we don't need through all both, because that would be the opposite side of what we're sketching on. So if that circle was in the middle of a plate, you can say through all both, it'll cut both sides. But in this case, it's just through all, and it will cut one direction, and hit apply. And there's our hole. Now let's go to some of the neat tools up here. The fillet tool. Let's say you wanted to round this off, and you're going to grab a file and round that off. The fillet tool does that for you. Click on fillet. Okay, and you just over here, make sure you select full preview. On slower computers, you could turn off on no preview if you don't want to see it. It really, even on slow computers, it doesn't add that much. I think it's really nice to see a full preview. And then over here, set it to 1 inch for the radius. And now go ahead and select this edge up here, and you'll see a preview. What it's gonna round off. It's gonna cut off all that excess there, like filing it off. So you select the edge where the file would contact. Those of you who are used to 2-dimensional CAD, be aware you're normally selecting these 2 edges. If you do that, you're not going to get the right effect. And also, make sure you don't select the face. Look at here. This is the edge. It highlights in orange. If I move over here, the whole face highlights. If I click on it, I don't get any preview, which is usually a bad sign. But look at to the right of my pointer. It shows little symbols to help you out with this. If you see a box like that, that means you're about to select a face. If you move to the actual edge, you'll get a little line. That means you're selecting the edge. So just make sure you select that, and there you go. You got a preview. Otherwise, if it's a smaller radius, it'll fillet everything on that face. All the edges will be filleted. Sometimes you want that, and it's very useful, but in this case you don't. It will come up later in a couple exercises, and I'll show you where it's very useful. But right now, just make sure you select those two. Do not select the other side. I know you're tempted, but we're not going to do that. Hit the green check mark, and there we have it. Okay. The next thing we want to do here, I want to show you the chamfer tool. Hit the little arrow underneath fillet, and you'll find chamfer. Now for chamfer, we're going to set it to 0.125 and keep it at 45 degrees. Notice it's set to distance, angle to distance. Now if we went distance to distance instead of 0.125 by 0.125, we'd know that it would automatically be 45 degrees. But in this case, why bother? Let's leave it at angle to distance and make sure full preview is selected. It's very helpful. Also, tangent propagation will enable it to follow those radiuses all the way around, so you don't have to select all the edges. It's a nice time saver. So go ahead and select this edge. You'll see the chamfer appear. Go ahead and get this one too up here. And hit the green check mark when you're ready. You could go ahead and rotate with your middle mouse button on the screen. And now I want you to rotate this so that you're looking at it from this angle. If you want, again, like I said, orientation is very important when you're learning this. So if you want, hit the pause button right now, orient it so it looks just like mine. Okay, if you have that oriented with your rotation keys or your middle mouse button, whatever you want to do, now we're going to shell this out. We're going to make it a thin-walled plastic part. So find the shell command up here. Click on shell. We're going to set the parameters to 60 thousandths of an inch, so 0.06. And show preview isn't all that necessary, but you could see right now, without selecting any faces, it will shell everything inside. That's what we're looking at with that yellow preview. And there you can see the wall thickness around there. Be very careful here. It's very common. People hit enter, they get excited, and you shelled everything inside. But you didn't open any faces up, so be careful when you're doing this. Don't hit the green check mark yet. Instead, I want you to select this face right here. Just click on it. It will turn blue. Then go ahead and select this face over here on the left. And finally, this face on the right. And actually, the order doesn't really matter, but notice what it's doing. Those are the faces to be removed. Okay, everything else is going to exist. So if you wanted this boss here sticking out for the whole, you would leave it. Otherwise, if you don't want a boss, you could click on it. Notice it disappears. Click on it again to bring it back. You could do that pretty much with any selection option inside SolidWorks. If you click on it once, it will perform the action. If you click on it a second time, it will disable the action. So just remember, that's a great tool. Saves a lot of undos. Go ahead and hit the green check mark, and now you'll see it shelled out. Go ahead and rotate it with your middle mouse button, and we've finished the model according to what I wanted to complete. Now what I'd like to show you some rendering tools. Rendering tools, not everyone needs to know these things, but it's nice for making a portfolio. Many of my students, I really encourage them to make a portfolio so that your employer can see what you're capable of. And when you're making a portfolio, you don't want it to look bland and boring. You want to show something that looks really exciting and dynamic on the screen. Comes to life with the rendering tools. So go ahead, first of all, rotate this so it looks like that, maybe. Pick a view that you really like. Now, one of the critical things before you start rendering is perspective. When you use a camera and you take a picture, everything has a vanishing point. So essentially it all goes to the center of wherever you're taking the picture usually. And if you don't have that on here, it doesn't look real. So the little television set, our monitor that you have here for view settings, click on that and you'll see perspective. My perspective, I think, is set a little higher than the default because I was playing with it earlier. So what you'd want to do here, you could go to View. So again, you go to View and Modify, and you'll see Perspective. The observer position, I have set mine to 1. You'll notice if I set it to the default, which is 3, it's a very minor variation. But if you set it up to 1, it looks, I mean, in my opinion, it could look more realistic. But again, that's dependent upon like camera angles and things like that. But I like it set to 1 in this case. Not all parts are going to look good at 1. You might want to change it. Notice you could put 0.5. You can put whatever you want in there. The more you set it, the closer it looks like you zoomed up to it. So like I set mine to 0.5 there. Hit the green check mark. And remember, you don't want to work in perspective usually. It's very difficult inside SolidWorks. Other systems for visualization and animation work well in perspective. SolidWorks does too, but the dimensions kind of skew a little bit, so it's a little more challenging than some of the other systems that don't really use dimensions. All right, so go up to, now if you have this, it's a great tool. Go to SolidWorks add-ins and make sure you select Photo View 360. If you don't have it, that would mean that the license just was probably not purchased. It's an additional option, comes in different variety packs that SolidWorks offers, but in the core package, I don't think it comes standard. So Photo View 360, if you have it, go ahead and select it. Otherwise, you could fast forward through it if this doesn't matter to you. Okay, now with that being said, let's say we wanted to just paint. Like you saw, I had blue edges for these faces here. You could select this face right here, and that's where these beach balls come in. You'll see appearances. If you hit this the big beach ball, hit the little arrow to the right of it, you'll see you could change just that one individual face, the entire chamfer set or feature. So that's that one feature. If you look on the feature tree, chamfer includes both those chamfers. The entire body or the entire part file. We just want the chamfer 1, so go ahead and select that. Now on the left, you could change colors over here. These are just basic transformations of colors if you'd like that. Otherwise, the more advanced tools up here, you could go to metals and plastics, and I'm going to go to painted here, and then go to car, and I'm going to go with the gloss blue. Okay, feel free to pick whatever color you like, or any metal, or whatever you want to have fun with on that one. Hit the green check mark. Okay, now to see it, you click on Integrated Preview. Now there's a preview window depending upon what you want to use here, but go to Integrated Preview, and it gives you, the longer you wait, the better the image will come up. So here you can see, as I'm waiting, the longer I wait, the smoother the image comes out. Notice the car paint as the details of those, what I would assume is like metal flake that's in there. It's getting smaller and smaller and more detailed. Notice up here, you could go to Edit Scene, and you could adjust the plane. Like right now, it doesn't look quite like, and when you rotate, it loses the image. Now be aware, you might want to disable the integrated preview to speed things up, especially on slow computers. I have a pretty decent workstation I'm working on here, and so it's a little on the faster side. But here you could see floor shadows are turned on. I had the bottom view plane selected. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Selected Plane. And you could do this too. Now all of a sudden you could see, look at that. It gives us that shadow effect. But if you hit this little arrow up in the upper left corner where it says Part or Part 1 or Part 2, you could select the front plane, which just so happens to be the base of our model. Now mine disappears for a second, not to worry. Go back down here on the left to Align Floor Planes, and right next to Selected Plane, hit the little flip arrow button here. And now look at that. You could see it as though it's laying on a table. You could change the offset or leave it at 0. I'm going to hit the green check mark at this point because I'm pretty happy with that. And I'm going to re-rotate this to a view that I like. And it disabled perspective, interestingly enough, when I went in there. So you might want to turn perspective back on. And then I'm just using the scroll button to zoom up. If you're wondering, like, computers that have multiple cores work much faster. In fact, if you do a Control-Alt-Delete and bring up your task manager, you could go to Performance and Open Resources Monitor. This will give you the number as well as your speed of what's going on your computer. You can see here I have a total, and it actually tells me over here, processes. I have 86 processes, 1,500 threads being utilized at this time. But the cores on my processor, it's actually a 6-core, a true 6-core, but then it uses the hyper-threading technology, so it's simulating like 6 additional cores. So I have like 11 CPUs going at one time here. Now watch as I rotate this, and as it takes time to render, I can bring that back up, and you can see it does actually use all the processors. All these CPUs are maxing out as quickly as they can. You can also see your clock rate on your processor adjust, like at 3.3. I have the Core i7-3930K CPU, 3.2 gigahertz. But I have it overclocked, and I have liquid cooling on here, so it's a bit on the faster side. So see, mine's going to 4.1 gigahertz, even though I just have it overclocked. So faster the computer, the better you are with this rendering. So okay, just wanted to share that with you. That concludes this exercise up to this point. If you like, in the manual, you'll see that there's actually 2 labs that go along with this, Lab 1 and Lab 1B. Feel free to go ahead and work on those, and if you want, you could watch the entire video and see how those are made, or else just challenge yourself by not watching the video and then go back and later on watch the last few minutes of this video. So I'm going to start those right now. You're welcome to watch them or stop it, pause it. So for those labs, let me bring up my manual here. And I had the SolidWorks Basics manual. If you want to download the manuals, you can. You just hit download here when you go to the Vertania 1 website. But I'm going to go down here. And excuse these. Again, these are really thrown together. I've not... I write all my own materials. I put them together quickly, so they're not always the best things. But in this case, you see it's like the letter F, and it's just extruded a 1/2 inch thick, and it has some dimensions on there. Let's see how we do that one. So I'm just going to start with the new part file. And I'm going to go to the front plane and start a sketch. Take the line tool, and if you remember, it's a 2 by 3.5 inch, and I'm going to draw it sideways here. So I'm going to click down here. I'm going to go up 2 inches because that's like the top of the F. Click, and I'm going to go to cross, and it's only 1 inch across. So again, I'm just getting close. Then this goes about 1 inch deep, so I could get right there if I want. Either way. And then I'm going to go across here. It goes about 3/4 of an inch, so about 0.75-ish. Drag this up and infer to that point up there. Click, drag it across. And again, I'm just using the line tool. And this one's about 1 inch, about 3.75. If you double click, I accidentally double clicked there. That ends the line chain, by the way. So that's a good thing to know. If you double click, you could end the chain, or if you right click, there's end chain. If you hit escape, it actually escapes you out of the line tool, which sometimes you want. In this case, I don't want to do that. So notice I'm still in the line tool. I'm going to click here, drag out a line, drag this down a little further, drag this across, down. And really, you just draw what you see. So that little image I drew this out. Now, all these little green boxes, when you get more and more detailed and you get more fluid with SolidWorks, you might want to disable them. Let me show you how that's done. Just go to View up at the top here. Go to Display. We want to go to. So you're going to go to View and Hide Show and find Sketch Relations. That will disable those. They're actually there still, they're just hidden, so they don't get in your way. Hit the F key on your keyboard for Zoom to Fit, and let's proceed with putting some of the dimensions in. Go to Smart Dimension, dimension the line. This is supposed to be 2 inches. Again, I'm just clicking and dragging away. Click down here, this is going to be 3.5. Click up here, this is going to be 1. And then it's dimensioned 1.75 from this edge to this edge for the next one. We could have put 0.75 just for that little blue line that's down there, but a lot of times you want to follow the print. So it's just good practice. Now the next one, again, it's baseline dimension off of this left edge. Click, and then click over on this one, and that's going to be 2.5. And notice I'm staggering these so they're easy to see. This dimension from here to the bottom edge is 1 inch. And then this blue line, you dimension from here to here, and that's 0.85. Now there's still a blue line. That line up there, I don't have it called out on the print, but you'll see if I drag it, it means that if you're ever wondering, like, what is it missing, just drag that blue line and you can kind of identify usually, looks like I'm missing a height. So you could use the dimension tool and lock it in, but this is an excellent opportunity to show you how to force a relationship. I'm going to hit Escape. All you do is you hold Control. Actually, you don't have to hold Control just yet. The very first line you select or entity you select, just click on it, release it. Now hold Control for every subsequent thing that you want to relate it to. So if I want to relate it to this edge up here, I hold Control and I select that edge. Now on the left hand side, it gives me any existing relations, how many selected entities that are going to be affected. In this case, there should just be 2. And then below are the relations, like I had mentioned early on: horizontal, vertical, collinear, perpendicular, parallel, equal, or fix. Very rarely do you ever use fix. Try and stay away from that one unless you become more advanced. It can be useful for DXF, DWG conversions and things, but I usually don't use it too often, and it causes more difficulty and pain than it's worth sometimes for a new user. So just be careful of hitting that one right now. But in this case, we want those to be collinear. Click on them, and you'll see they align to each other. And then you click on the green check mark, and you're in good shape. Now, one thing I forgot to show you is to save this. Well, first let's extrude it. Now we go to Features, Extrude Boss Base, and it's only 1/2 inch, so type 0.5, hit Enter, and the green check mark. Hit Escape. And now to save something, in this case, this needs to be saved as L1 for Lab 1. Hit Save and type in capital L1. Now the exercise that I just done, or that we worked on together, is exercise 1. So save that. If you're in my training courses and you're taking my classes, save it as E1. That makes it easy for me to grade them. Know exactly what they are just looking at them. So L1 in this case, and save it wherever you want. And it's saved. Okay, the next one. Let's bring back our manual here. L1B is this, looks like a brick with a cutout in it and 4 holes. Let's get that one going here. I'm going to just move it over so I can see my screen a little bit better. Okay, and just go to File, New, Part, hit OK. Again, the front plane works really well. Start a sketch. This is a symmetric part, so as I showed you earlier, there's a center rectangle tool. It's to your advantage to use the center rectangle. Be aware, I don't always show you the most efficient ways to use the tools. part of your learning experience is seeing a variety of tools. So to show you the most efficient every time doesn't show you variety, because sometimes tools are important even though you don't use them all the time. So just be aware in some of the videos you'll watch, you'll say, well, if you're a more user that more advanced, you'll say, oh, I could have done that a lot easier. Be aware, I'm showing you some tools that you might not normally see, and thus you could use them for different situations to your advantage. Anyhow, click on that center, get that little orange dot, drag out your rectangle, go to Smart Dimension. Dimension the bottom line 5 inches, and dimension the left or right line at 3 inches. So it's a 3 by 5. Now, I'm going to show you a little trick here. Normally, I'd like you to draw in each individual circle, and so you get experience and dimension to each one. But if you're seeing this, you probably want to see a shortcut, so I might as well show you one. Next exercise, we go into mirroring, but this one I'll show you a little trick, how to mirror ahead of time. If you go to the line tool, hit the little arrow to the right of it, find center line. Draw a vertical center line, so infer to the origin, click and drag it down here, lock it in, and then drag out to the left a horizontal origin, or center line. With those two there now, you could go to the circle tool. Now be really careful here. Do not, and I repeat, do not touch this center line. Don't attach your circle to it, or else it's going to get stuck there. For a more advanced user, it's really easy to just delete the reference or the relation. For new users, it's not so easy. So anyway, just draw your circle floating out here. Don't touch the edge, because look at that. You're going to get tangency. Stay away from that. Click just right about here. Make sure you're not touching anything. And now go to Smart Dimension and dimension the outside. And that's going to be a 1/2 inch in diameter. Now dimension the circle again to the left edge. Drag it up. This needs to be dimensioned 0.75, so 3/4 of an inch from the left edge. And then select the circle again and dimension to this top line. If you're getting anything that you're not seeing on the screen, looks a little different, hit escape a couple times. Try it again. Okay, go ahead and hit 0.75, hit enter. Oops, first you have to click. Sorry. 0.75, and now it's located. Again, good practice. Lay your dimensions out so they look nice. Okay, so we have our circle. Rather than drawing that 3 additional times and wasting all that time, I'm going to show you the shortcut. We normally learn this in exercise 2. I'm going to show it to you now. But be aware, exercise 2 has a lot of good sketching techniques other than that. Okay, so we want to mirror this across. Here's what you could do. Hit escape a couple times before you do this. Click one time on that circle and release it. Now hold Control and select the vertical center line. Not in the midpoint, but somewhere on it. Not at the ends either. Click. Release the Control key. Now you could go up to and use the Mirror Entities tool up here. Click on that. There it is. Mirrored it across. Try and follow those same steps again, but this time along the horizontal center line. Hold Control, select both circles, and then select the horizontal center line. Find the Mirror Entities tool, click. Done. Leaving the circles in here, in this case, is acceptable because they're going to turn out as holes that are through. We didn't do that with exercise 1, be aware. We're doing it a little bit different here, just showing you some neat little tricks on top of what you just learned. One other thing, a mistake that students make, is they go ahead and they draw that center core out like they do this. Problem with that, when you extrude it, it's going to want to break this up into little sections. Don't add that just yet. In fact, hit undo. You could go to edit and undo sketch center rectangle if you did that. Extrude it like so and then build on those extra features. So now I could go to features, extrude boss base, and the overall thickness is 1.5 inches. Hit the green check mark. Now there's a dozen ways you could have done this. This is just one way, by the way, I'm showing you. Now you could go ahead and select that face. Start your sketch, and the origin is centered. You don't even have to go to a front view. Just now go back to center rectangle. Now you could draw your center rectangle and easily lock it into the edges. Go to Smart Dimension, dimension that thickness in between there, which is 1.5, and now cut it. Go to Features, Extruded Cut. The depth is only supposed to be 1 inch. You can see it in the preview. Be aware, if this doesn't work and you don't have a hole in there, you might have accidentally selected Extruded Boss, which adds material. You want Extruded Cut. So if this says Cut Extrude up here, you're in good shape. If it says Boss Extrude, cancel out and now select Extrude Cut. Otherwise, you could delete that feature or hit undo a couple times to get rid of it. Hit the green check, and the part is done according to the print. Again, though, this is a pretty boring part if you want to show this off to a potential employer. So feel free to dress it up a little bit like I showed you with fillets and chamfers. I'll just go through really quick. I'm going to go to the fillet tool. Remember full preview. It should remember it from last time that it's turned on. And the fillets, you could set these to 0.5 and select the 4 corners. Look at this. You could even select through the part. You don't even have to rotate. You select right through it. Select the 4 corners and hit the green check mark to apply. Now go to chamfer, and you can just leave it at 0.1. Select this edge and this edge. Hit apply. The chamfer tool, you could also make like what looks like a countersink if you wanted to do that. The chamfer, and let's say we set it to 0.25 at 45. Select those edges there. And I think it's a little big. I'll set it to 0.2. Hit enter. Hit the green check. Now it looks like we have countersunk holes. Flip it around. And you could shell this now. Try shelling it. Go to Shell. And 0.06. And select this face. Hit the green check. And I shelled it out. Again, dress it up a little bit. Makes for a nice portfolio piece when you add the fillets and the chamfers, kind of sculpting it. And now if you want to do the photo rendering, you could right click on the chamfer if you want to change the chamfer or the holes. Do whatever you like. I'm just showing you some idea, giving you some ideas. I'm going to click here on the little beach ball and the arrow to the right of it. I'm going to go to chamfer, and I'm going to go with a metal this time. I'm going to go with brass. And notice all the different types of brass: cast, sandblasted, satin. I'm going to go with polished brass. Hit the green check mark. Now I'm going to click on the part again, and let's say I want to change the entire part. Click on the little arrow to the right of the beach ball, and part right here, click on this little circle, it's a sphere, and let's say we want that to be chrome. And look at that chromium plate. Hit the green check. Now you could actually select the chamfers right here in the feature tree as well. If you click on that, you got the same beach ball. Go to chamfer 2, and let's say we want those to be, we'll make it look like it's machined. We could go with chrome, maybe sandblasted, or matte chrome, or you could even change it, like go to aluminum or something, or paint it, do whatever you want, and burnished aluminum. All right, turn on perspective, zoom up, rotate it in the orientation you'd like, and now you could go to the render tools and integrated preview. Now, a couple things you could do if you want. I typically, for my students, I usually just say do a print screen. Hit your print screen button on your keyboard. It's right up at the top right near there, PRTSC for print screen. And then you could go ahead and drop it into a Word document and make your portfolio that way. And so here you can see the different material types, and you might actually want to change that to front again. So remember, there's the edit scene. Instead of bottom view of plane, selected plane, and up here we could hit this little arrow, gives us our feature tree. and we could select the front plane. And then remember, you have to hit the reverse switch, flip floor direction, and hit the green check. And for some reason when we do that, it shuts off or disables perspective, so you got to turn perspective back on. But get it to a position of your liking. You could maybe put it on a courtyard background. Let's see what that does. Get some interesting effects that way. The longer you let it sit, the crisper the image will come out. If you want to set it even higher under options, you'll see preview quality. I have mine set to better because I have a pretty high performance system. You can set it to maximum or best, but just be aware you're going to be waiting a long time. And then, like what I usually do here, I'll let it run through. I could start actually let it get as smooth as it can get. And then you hit print screen, or alt print screen will actually just capture the SolidWorks versus anything else. If you have a dual screen, you might want to hit alt, hold alt and hit print screen. And now you could go to Microsoft Word, bring that up, and we'll just call this L1 for Lab 1. And you can put down basic extrude fillets and chamfers. Oh, we forgot shelling as well. Basic extrude shelling, fillets and chamfers. And enter. And now through here you could go to insert and do screenshot and grab it right there. It doesn't always, I've seen it do some weird stuff. It doesn't always work. You could do Control V as well. That will paste it. And now you just click on the image, and up here make sure you go to Format and Crop. And then you can just grab these L-shaped brackets, drag them in to crop off the rest of the view screen, click off of it, and then you could click on it again and grab that and drag it out. And now you have a nice portfolio piece. Okay, and then you just keep going through creating your portfolio this way. Once you start making drawings of things too, that looks wonderful on a portfolio to show off to a potential employer. That concludes exercise 1 along with lab 1 and lab 1B.